Hello and welcome back to 100 Days of Code with me, Lilly Code. We're already on day 43 today, so we are flying through this. And we're going to just get started straight away. Let's jump into this. I had my headphones plugged in and they've come out, so start in 1 second. And the second is up. No, I paused the video and plugged in my headphones. So, yes, we're now looking at form validation. So we're looking at forms and how to validate these forms. So there's different times that you might want to validate a form. So what's going on here actually? Is this it? There's different times when you might want to validate, because this is the counter. This is the custom hook we made. So I'll just make sure I've opened up. Okay, so this is the wrong project. That's fine. We will just get the other one going. So 16, I presume. 15. This is 15. We'll have a look at that now in a moment. So the way you would want to validate a form is perhaps when the form is submitted. You might want to validate it if somebody goes into the box and does something. So when an input is losing focus. So if somebody puts in the key, the mouse, the arrow, this arrow, this arrow here, the mouse arrow, into the box and clicks, well then it's been focused. The box has been focused, and then if you move away, the box is unfocused. So you might want to do some validation on that action, or you also might want to do some validation perhaps every time a user enters a key. So you might want to check that a string being entered into an input box that accepts text is of a certain length. So therefore you'd need to check it on every keystroke and check when keystrokes reaches a certain amount of entered keystrokes, then we can remove that error message that says you must enter at least 4 letters in this box, in this input field. So just to give you an idea of some of the places where you might have validation. So we'll just get the correct project fired up here. I don't know why this one is up. So we are on chapter 16. Okay, so we're on the next one, so that's no problemo. I'm just going to continue to watch the video and get the next one running while that's happening. So perfect. Okay. So file, we will open recent. 16 is what we're looking for. It's already here, perfect. So I'll actually just close off 15. And just so I'm also closing off the server that's running in the background, our local server here on localhost, because we're going to want to spin that up again, and it's going to tell us, do you want to open it again? Port 3000 is already taken. Do you want to open this on a new port? So rather than having to go through all that, we will just set it up again here. So, excuse me guys, sorry. The the cable was just in an unfavorable position there, so I fixed it. So we'll cd into the code folder and then into the 01 folder. And from here we can do an npm install. Npm start is all we need to do. We did an npm install yesterday. And we can see here we have our package.json, our package.lock.json, and also our node modules folder. So we've run npm install and we haven't updated any packages. We haven't changed any of the numbers in here to require, say, if there was an updated testing library /jest DOM, and Jest is just a testing framework. So say if there was an upgraded version of this and this had been updated, we might want to run an npm install, but at the moment that hasn't happened. So we can just do npm start, and we see we've been left here with an error. I remember this error now, yes. So on line 36 of simple input, we were getting undefined, and I was messing about trying to put in some checks to see if entered name was undefined. Then so if it's undefined, then we should just return. Why would we want to go ahead and do anything else? So if entered name equals defined, just return. That makes more sense. And then, so perhaps it wasn't so silly what I was doing. Let's find out now. And then if we will open we just should open up another. What is going on with my brain and my hand today? They're not really working together. Oh, so, and I have, anyway, irrelevant. I was just going to say I have cream on my face and my eyes feel so like there's cream all over my face. So we'll just continue on, and I'll save this now, like an oil-based cream. So anyway, irrelevant, but it's sort of hard to see. No, it's fine. So we'll just continue here, and so we still have undefined there. Okay, let's figure out what's going on here. So line 38. Okay, so actually it was failing further down. So let's try that again. On line 38, undefined is not defined. So undefined, that looks spelt wrong. Undefined. Yeah, it is. Undefined. But we spelled it wrong. Yeah, this is undefined. So, yes, let's just copy this for the moment. Go back to the way it was. Just to see whether that was or was not a logical approach, you know. So we'll go back to the way it was, which was like this. I'll paste in the second bit, because actually I think upon thinking about this again, it would be better like that. But I just want to stick with trying to fix one thing at a time rather than going all over the place, changing loads of things. Let's just focus on what the actual problem is, which is now should be on a different line, because so now it's on line 40. So this is actually the problem. So what we will say is if, let's just try the same approach but down here. So if named input ref is triple equal to undefined, and I'll just move this here, then we want to just return. Excuse me. Sorry guys. So then we just want to return. So I'll save that and see what's going down. Cannot read properties of undefined reading value. So let's just make sure we have all of these different. Oh, look, we haven't yet defined our. No, that shouldn't be it. That should not be it. So that we can still, if we're just referring to named input ref.current.value here and assigning it to this value, well then, you know, that should not interfere with us using this same thing down here, because we just hadn't assigned it yet. So we should be able to find that if we can find it on the line that was down below. So I thought maybe we needed to move that up, but I don't think that's the case. It's not the case, I should say. So what we can do now, seeing as we have the named input ref.current.value actually assigned to something, we can just say if entered value. And this means if it's true, if it's there. So we'll say if it's not there, then just return. And let's see if this helps with the error that we're seeing. So then down on simple input line 41, we have a problem. When we are assigning. So let's just save again and do a hard reload, because I don't think line 41 is the issue, yeah. So this is the problem. So let's just search for name input ref. So that's the name we've given to our input. Okay. So just crossing my legs on my chair here. So we have named input ref there being assigned to the ref property on the input. So okay, that makes sense. Then we have name input ref is using ref. Use ref is imported from React. Okay. And then down here we're trying to use that. So I'm just gonna go to the next section and see, just make sure what's going on with this name input ref, because I'm a little bit confused. Maybe I've stopped too shortly in the video, you know, and there's something else that I'm missing that I'm not aware of. So here's our named input ref in this in Max's files, and then we're just assigning the constant, the entered value, to named input ref dot current dot value. So he hasn't done anything different here. And then we just have our ref. Ay, ay, ay. Mamma mia. I'm really not too sure why we have this error. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out though. Okay guys, so there's a few possible explanations as to why we're getting this error and why we can't fix it at the moment. First of all, maybe I'm just not fully getting the flow of exactly what we're supposed to be doing here. That's a possibility. That's a big possibility. It's definitely possible. The second thing that could be happening is Max just wasn't actually finished going through this part of the course, and I've just fired up my project at this particular location, and actually we're not finishing the code that we're currently doing, and they're pretty much the only two explanations. But the solution that I'm thinking of is just to continue, and perhaps we're missing something, and perhaps then I'll see what's wrong. So I'm gonna just continue. Okay. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope your Monday is going well. Just watching the video here, so it's often my time to have a little a little natter with you guys. I do quite enjoy it. So what we're going to do is add an onBlur property to this form, and what that's going to allow us to do is to tell if someone has come in and touched in this form area. So that's what we're going to do next. So underneath this name input change handler, I'll just get rid of all of this because that's a bit confusing. You know, we just need this to set the entered name in there with the event.target.value. Well, not confusing, but let's code cleanup is a better way to put it. So then we're going to create a constant name input blur handler. Blur in it. I'm a great band. People will probably be not too impressed with my terrible blur impression. It's probably not even how they speak. So then this is going to be an arrow function that we take in the event, and I'll just add in the arrows like so. And what we want to do in here is set entered name touched, and we'll have to create this, or do we have it already? Set entered name touched. Looks like we have it. Yes, we preempted this change. So set entered name touched to true. And that way we can see if someone has come in and touched the input area of our name, where we're entering our name. So input touch, to touch an input. Let's just make sure that I'm giving you the exact right definition of what it means. So I think it just means to click your mouse and then move away. But let's make sure that that's the case, because that's what I'm telling you guys, you know. So while that's loading, we'll come back to that. What is going on? Why are you being so slow, man? So why that's being so slow, man, we'll continue on. Cool. Okay, so what we might want to do, once we've touched in the input box, once we know someone has come in there and done something, we want to run some validation in here. So what we can do is add an if statement and say if entered name dot trim, throw in our brackets, and is equal to just a pair of parentheses. So there's our if statement, and we'll open up our curly parentheses here, and then we'll say set entered name is valid, So this is not the end. We want set entered name is valid. There we go. And set it to false. Yeah, and then return. Cool. And had some formatting going on there. That was nice. Yes. Okay, cool. So on blur, when the input loses focus, so it's what it is. It's when the input loses focus. So yeah, when you move the mouse away from the input area and it knows it's left the input area, that's when you've lost focus. Bit like my brain right now. I know we're getting on great. I've got my chai tea, happier than a pig in mud. Did you like that, guys? So I'll just add in an on blur function here and add in my parentheses, and then we're going to add an on blur handling event. So that's what we want there. So this is how we'll handle that touched area. So we already have our blur handler created. So all these console logs just need to go. We need to clean up this file a little bit. This needs to go. Keep things neat and tidy. Don't do what I'm doing right now, which is, things all over the shop. Keep it concise, keep it clean, add comments where necessary. Say if you've come down to this function and you've just figured out what this has done and it's taken you a while. I remember in my second job that used to happen. We had such complex functions. It was crazy. They were so complex and they'd be jumping all over the project. There'd be events being passed all over the place, and it took you a while, and I had less experience, so it took me sometimes an hour, sometimes a day to figure out exactly what I was supposed to do with my Jira ticket or with my work assigned, and to figure out what different functions were doing and to follow the whole chain all the way across the whole app. It was a huge application. So when you finally figure out what one function is doing, if you didn't know what it did in the beginning and then you figure it out, do a little comment, just add a comment in and say what it's doing. So you can always come back to that then. So this is how you do a multi-line comment in a JavaScript file, in a HTML file. You can do a forward, in a JavaScript file, I'm not certain about if this, and in a HTML file, yes, what am I talking about? So you do a / and a star, and then you can put as many stars as you want, and when you do a / a star and a / again, this closes off the comment. So for this particular function down here, you could say that this is handling an event. It's handling an event to check to submit the form, and then down here you might have something else that it's doing. So then you could say event default action stopped and name checked. Well, that's a bit you don't really need this particular bit, because the words I've used to describe this, which is very clear, is more wordy. I've just added in event default action stopped, and realistically this event.prevent default says that much better than my terribly put together phrase there. So you can just leave that out, keep it concise, keep it clean. So what you might want to say is that you're checking if the name is valid, name checked for validity, and then, what else are we doing? Are we submitting this somewhere? Yes, and then we are, what's going on, eh? So this ends here. We get the event, set entered name to touch. So first of all, we're saying that yes, you did touch in the area, in the input area. Then we're saying event prevent default, so prevent the default behavior on that particular event. Then we are coming down into this if block, and for the if block we are saying if the entered name is undefined. So I just put that in there, so we'll actually get rid of that because, you know, just to have it the way it was with Max. So then we have if the entered name dot trim is equal to nothing, set entered name is valid to false, and then return. So what we should actually be doing in here is submitting the form, because I don't see that happening. But anyway, you know, so we're checking for the name validity, and if invalid, return. So you can do things like this if you have quite complex functions around the place in order to allow you to keep track of what's going on. So, okay, great. Excuse-moi. More chai tea for me. Okay. Cool. So, just watching the video. Okay. So, what we're actually doing here is checking if on the name input on the name input change handler, what we want to do is check for the event, then set entered name to the event to the event.target.value, and then we want to copy this but just change it slightly. So we will copy this code up here, and what we want to do in the name input change handler is actually check if the entered name.trim does not equal to an empty array. Then we want to set entered name is valid to true, because we have something more than, not an empty array, an empty string, pardon me, this is an empty string. So just nothing has been passed in, or else just space was passed in, because that's what trim does, it's get rid of white space. So once we have the entered name and we've trimmed it, so we've removed all white space, meaning there's nothing there, if it was equal to just an empty string. So if it's not equal to an empty string, we can set entered name is valid to true, and we can remove the return statement because we just want to set that to true. That's okay. And then we will save, and I can also add in my semicolon here. So I now know what's going wrong with our code. So when we're using state and we're tracking the state of something within a single block of code, the state has not been updated yet. So when is the state updated then? Like, you cannot be setting the state of a variable or setting the state of something that you've declared and then directly down below using that thing, because it hasn't saved it in memory yet for it to be used, you know? So we need to sort of finish what we're doing and then use the thing that we're trying to set. So Max is going to say that again. That makes perfect sense. That's where we're getting this error, and now we have a new error. But that's okay. So we'll have a look at that now in a moment. So such state updates, when we're updating the state of something, it is scheduled by React. So it's not done immediately, it's scheduled. So therefore you cannot use it immediately. Yeah. So if we use this one here, where are we? set entered name is valid. That's not what I'm talking about. This here, so if we try and use this entered name, yes, here. So here we've set entered name to touched, and we'll just actually copy this blur function because that should go down into that on blur empty JSX fragment, which is the error that we're getting down here. So if I just undo that and show you the error, it's a very obvious error, but so we should solve these things together, and nothing is obvious until you know how. It's only obvious because I've been looking at this stuff for so long now, so long being 4 years, which isn't even that long at all, but it starts to become obvious, but it's not obvious. When you first start, it's not obvious at all. So every time I say that, stick it in a little bag, tie up the string ties, because this is a string tie bag, and throw the word obvious away because it's not obvious. We're all learning. We are all learning. I love to say it here. It's what I always say. It's the truth. Okay, enough of that. So down here in our fail to compile in our browser, we can see we have an error message here. So our error message is that where we are here, so we're in our simple input.js, that's where we are. JSX attributes must only be assigned non-empty expression on line 68. And look, there you have it, line 68, and it says on blur. And you can see that this is an empty expression. And maybe if you're just following along a tutorial and you're very, very new to this, you know, it might not be apparent if you've just missed something from in here. But if you look at the other examples of where we've passed in a property to this input, it's expecting something. Right, so here we've passed something in, and in this case we haven't. We've just left it empty, and it's saying that the error is JSX attribute, so that's a JSX attribute. So I know the correct terminology for you guys, you know. So this is a JSX attribute. Yes, it's a JSX attribute, and it must be assigned a non-empty expression. So we've left this empty here, so that's the issue, in fact, which makes perfect sense. Now I've explained it, hopefully. So if we go back up here, what we want to happen on the event of blur, it would make sense if we had done this and we weren't too sure of what should have that have been. I'm not really sure. Going back through the video, well, it was an on blur. We were trying to do something on blur of this input box because we've called it the on blur property. So we were going to pass it then a function to run in the event that this input box was blurred. So if we come back and look through our code, one of the things that gets our attention immediately is, well, this function is not being used. And then if we hover over it there, we can see it's been declared, but the value is never read. So there's a red flag. And then we can also see that this is the blur handler. So, you know, by power of deduction, that's all. It's, you know, none of this is obvious, but by just keeping on going through it and deducting, deducing down, simmering that pot, what could be the thing here? What's going wrong? And you just tip, tap away, and eventually you get your answer. Just keep practicing. And if it seems totally double Dutch, take a walk, take a break, you know. It's hard to do this stuff if you're really a bit like your brain has gone to mush because you've been wrecking your head for so long and you just can't see the solution. That's time to take a break then and go on a walk. So if we see here now, we have another error, simple input line 41. So, and this is the error I'm talking about prior to that other error and the other path I went down. So we can see here on line 41, we're saying if the entered name.trim is equal to a empty string or nothing, basically, or an empty string, like the type would still be of string. This is literally saying an empty string, nothing of the type string. So because of these single quotes, this is setting it as a type of string. That these denote a string. So if we said hello, this would be a string of hello, you know. It just so happens to be an empty string at the moment. So we are trying to use entered name. Right underneath, we've actually declared it. So we shouldn't be using entered name here. What we should be using is event.target.value, because it just can't find that at the moment. So .target.value should work, because it's going to have that. It's going to have the value passed in from the event, hopefully. Let's find out now. Whereas the state may not always be there. So, yes. So then down here, cannot read properties of undefined reading value on simple input line 48. So here we're just trying to entered value is using the use for entered value. So let's have another look. So const entered value is the named input ref.current.value. I'm not really sure what's wrong with that line. I'm not totally familiar with this use ref. I'm still learning about it. Okay. Should be on silent. silent. You gotta get with me if you wanna get silent. Yeah, sorry about my phone not being on silent. Oh, ridiculous. So I'll just put it on. Or fantastic, life is for living, have a laugh. Cool. Yeah. Cool. So the first thing that Max has said, which is great, he's going to start cleaning up this code, which is awesome. Because it's a bit messy and I'm a bit confused and I'd like him to continue. Well, I just don't know what's going on with my error, basically. I'm not really confused, but I don't know how to solve that error. I'm not sure what's wrong with it, at least. So, and as I said, use ref is a new thing and, bada bing, bada boom. So he's going to go through this file now. He said that this is all being done for a simple input. And there's a lot going on here for a simple input. It's not looking all that simple to me. And great, he's actually just said the same thing, that this is supposed to be a simple input. And he was just explaining concepts and the simplicity has gone out the window. So we're going to refactor this file now, which will hopefully get rid of if there's something wrong in there, and we'll get to the end of, how to make this work as it should. So let's keep watching. Yeah. A lot of repetition. A lot of code in general. What? So now he's going to just delete that line of code, which is great because this is the line that was giving me hassle. But I would like to know what it does. I'll look up useRef again. So that's okay. We can look up useRef. So I'll get rid of that line of code as being directed. And now... Okay, so entered value is now defined but never used. Let me just continue to watch. Okay. Yeah, so he did get rid of it and he said there's no point in keeping the useRef around. So we'll also just get rid of this for the moment because that's what our error was saying. It was saying that we have used, if we go back there and save, it says entered value is defined, is not defined. Oh no, I was going deleting the wrong thing, wasn't I? Just jumping about the place like a bloody kangaroo. So entered value is not defined on line 48. So we didn't update our code here. So what we should also do is this should all be inside this. I mean, it just has to be. What? How can that just be all hanging around out here? Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense as well. So like, here's a set entered name is valid and an if statement looking for entered value. And if we don't have one, return. But what are we returning from? Why would we just put this little small if statement here saying if we don't have an entered value, return? That just didn't make any sense to me. So I think, and I was correct, that these setting things and doing the if statement, they shouldn't just be hanging around outside here in this component. They should be within this function. So when we are actually getting that information and we have an event or we have the entered value, that's when we want to set something to true. So these should come in here. I'm nearly sure of it, I am. So I'll just tab that in, save, and let's have a look at what is going on in our browser. Oh, we're getting closer. I seen a flash of the end goal. Don't know why I'm so singy-songy today. Sure, I sing songs all the time, as you guys know. If anybody makes it to 35 minutes in my videos. So yeah, so now we're on line 43. Let's check that out. So entered value, that's okay. So we'll just say event.target.value. Although, do you know what? I'll just keep watching Max for a moment rather than. And we'll also get ref from down here because we got rid of that. And remove it from our array import because we are no longer using it, and we can get rid of this. And I'll just search that we have got rid of the instances of that. Cool. And then we're just going to add a new constant. So here we have these 3 states being tracked. Instead, we're going to add another constant here called entered name is valid. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. So we're going to define a constant and we're going to check if entered name dot trim is not equal to an empty, just a empty string, then that will evaluate to false or true dependent. So, you know, it will tell us if entered name is valid. This entered name is valid Boolean that we've now defined will switch from true to false dependent on whether or not we have entered a name. That's what we're saying there. Okay. Oh, yeah. So now entered name is valid. Okay, so he just deleted something. Okay, so in the name input handler in here, we can now get rid of all of this checking because we already know that when we have an entered name, we've already checked for its validity. So we can get rid of the stuff within the functions checking for validity now. So that will be down here as well. And then in the name input blur handler, we can also make some changes in here. So we don't need to validate this. Yep. Okay. And so then what we can do is actually we have this other constant being declared, named input is valid, and I'll just cut this and move this up underneath this other Boolean. So what this is saying, so now we have the name input is valid, and this is checking if the entered name is not valid, because that's what this not is. So if entered name is valid is false, which is what this little exclamation is doing, and the entered name is touched, then we will set name input is invalid to true. So the name will be invalid in the case that we've put our mouse into the box but we haven't entered a valid name, which makes sense. So now we have entered name and entered name touched. We actually do not need the entered name is valid anymore, because we're checking, we have this constant, a boolean that we're instead defining, which is just checking whether or not we have something in the entered name at all, and is therefore returning a true or false off the back of that. So we can actually get rid of the set state for entered name is valid now. Okay, and then in the form submission handler, down here, we are again passing in the event, and what we want to do is set the validity. So, so instead what we want to do, rather than, I already got rid of it. So down here we had our code, which was doing the check to check if it was trimmed or not. But what we'll do, instead of writing an if block to check this, we just copy this, because now we know this is true or false depending on whether or not the entered name is valid or not. And we can come down here and use that. So we can literally just paste in entered name is valid, and if it is not valid, we'll return. Okay, and then we don't need to set entered name is valid here because we got rid of that state. So, Maximillian. Entered name is valid. If it's not valid, then return set entered name. Okay. Let's. Excuse me, and then set entered name back to just nothing. That makes sense. So let's just see what's gone wrong. So it's telling us entered name is valid has already been declared. So we've obviously duplicated something here. So entered name is valid. Let's just do it said line 9. So where else has it been declared? Let's just do a hard reload of this page to be sure. You never know until you hard reload. And we can close other things off. Okay, so now we have a different error. So cannot read trim of entered name. So let's just see what that's about. So entered name. Right. Why not though? Excuse me, my friends. So we have entered name touched, set entered name touched, set entered name, use state. That all makes perfect sense. This should be started as an empty string. That was our only mistake to begin with, I think. So that should actually be an empty string, which makes perfect sense, because no wonder it couldn't find anything at all, because we didn't initialize entered name on the first pass of running this component. We needed to initialize it with an empty string in order to say, here is our starting state. We're trying to do a comparison straight away after we've already declared this use state object or variable object. I presume it's an object actually. I should console log that out and just see like what comes out. so I'm using the correct terminology, because I've been calling that a variable the whole time, but I will not get too distracted because we've just figured out what's going wrong. So uno momento until I just give this a whirl and get back to you guys. So basically we've declared use state to track the state of this particular item, entered name, and set entered name is the function in order to update the entered name. Then straight away down below here, we're going sequentially down the file. We come to entered name is invalid. We're declaring another constant, and that's relying on the entered name, and we're trying to trim the entered name. So if this was empty and we just declared a use state object and we didn't tell it, you know, anything about it, well, how are we supposed to perform a trim on just an object? You know, we can't perform a trim on just whatever you're going to call this thing. I think it's an object now from thinking about this logically and explaining this. Use state must create an object that there's a function to update that object, I presume. So if we add back in our commas here, now we have initialized it at something. We've given it a first initial state. So when we come down and we initialize this particular component, we have a state. So you can trim a string, and all you'll get if you trim that empty string is an empty string. So it will be equal. It will in fact definitely equal empty string, because, well, first of all, they're just the same thing anyway. But dot trim, all it's doing is removing these. So dot trim comes along, sees this string being passed in, and just returns that. So that entered name dot trim is not equal to that. It's going to be false because it is equal to that on the first pass. And then entered name is valid. So if entered name dot trim is valid, okay, does not equal, yes, so it does equal, so this will be false. Perfect. Okay, yes, so entered name is valid will be false because it does not equal empty string. Whereas if it did equal empty string, this would evaluate to true and it would be valid. So if perhaps we had some letters in here, entered name dot trim would come along. There's no white space in there. If it was like this, dot trim would come along and return this. That's what this dot trim function is doing. That's the inbuilt function. That's what it does. So it would return that, and then entered name is valid would return true because it is not equal to an empty string. So now with it being empty to an now with it being the same as an empty string, it's not valid. So that's what's going on there, and that's why we had that error. So now if we leave nothing, our validation is working. Please enter a name. Name cannot be blank. Perfecto selecto. That's what we've been dying to see. So I'll add in Lily here as a name. Aye, come on. I'll put a name. And we're still having errors here with our name, but that's fine. That's totally fine. We need to check our form submission handler, because it's clearly not picking up that we do indeed have something, and we're getting a message out into the console saying name input is valid. So all I think we're not doing is setting this boolean back saying this is true, you know. So that's what I presume is going wrong there. So let's paste in this console log we have. Okay, so if entered name is valid, so if the name is valid, console log the name is valid, and this is relying on entered name is valid. So we have set entered name is valid to true, because it wouldn't be coming in here if it wasn't true. So let's just cancel this for a moment, click submit again. Let's add one more letter. Okay, so they show up previously, and then if we click submit, we get name input is valid and entered name is Lily, and then entered name blank. So on the form submit handler, we are setting the entered name touched to true. Yes, it has been touched. Then, okay, so we're just immediately setting it back to an empty string after we've clicked the submit button. So it's the expected behavior. This is what we have coded this to do. So yeah, we still don't have anything else happening on submit. So for the moment, that's actually fine. Our validation is working. Okay. So once we've, so the way to fix this is once we've set the entered name back to an empty string after we've submitted the form, if we then set entered name touched to false to say, well, it wasn't actually touched now, it's back in a perfectly clean state. So this should now go away and work. So let's just test it out. So I'll type in Lily, I'll click submit. It should go back to blank, and it should also say the form was not touched. So perfect. Ay, 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 mamma mia, what you doing to me, mia. So we'll just say hello and click submit. Okay, and on the first pass it works. So great, and on a second pass it does not, because it thinks that this is blank. So we need to actually reflect the saving of the blank in the code's memory to reflect into the box, so to feed that information back into the box. So great, that's okay, we can do that. Okay guys, so we're just sort of come to the end of the section here, and now Max is going to go into another few bits. So we'll continue with this tomorrow and pick up where we left off and continue on. So yeah, that's it really for day 42 of 100 days of code. 43, squeeze me, day 43. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, appreciate it so much. Please do like and subscribe if you like the content. It means the world to me, and have an absolute awesome day. Thank you so much guys. Peace and love.